Yo, what is good, agents? Welcome to our fourth podcast interview. And today we have my brother, Elijah Ferebee, host of the Soul Paramedic podcast. And we just going to jump right into it. But first, can you tell everybody who you are, man, and what you be doing?
Absolutely. So what's good, everybody? I'm grateful to be here with my brother Sid, homeboy, and I'm excited to have this opportunity to share in this space, in this place. Like my brother has said, I am Elijah Ferebee, the host of the Soul Paramedic podcast, dear friend / brother of Sydney Dawson for the past, 5-6 years. Currently living in the DMV, Washington, D.C. area, doing a multitude of things, but most importantly and most excitingly, being on my second year of podcasting. So tonight I'm going to share with you all what that journey's been like, how that experience has been for me, and whatever Sid and Ant have for me this evening, I'm more than happy to just go forward and share it with you all. So thank you for having me.
Of course, man, of course. You can start off, Sid.
All right, so listen, when you told me you had a podcast, I was like, first of all, you have a podcast. Second of all, why have I not heard it in full? So I gotta ask, like, I know you, so I feel like I have a sense of what it is, but what inspired you to make a podcast? And on top of that, as someone who, doesn't have a background in like audio engineering and like stuff like that, like what was that part of the journey like for you?
Absolutely. So one thing I forgot to share that both Sid and Ant know is that I am in ministry. So I am someone who is a part of the Christian faith tradition. And in that, the influence for the podcast came from my faith-based work and self-practice. So last year, while we were all in the pandemic and the different capacities that we were in it, I found myself like needing an outlet to kind of express how I was feeling, more so from the stance of faith as it related to everything that was going on with the pandemic, with social justice, with being a black man in the country. And I was like, okay, I have all of these things that I talk with my friends about. I have all these things that I write these lengthy posts about that nobody reads on Instagram or Facebook, I'm like, so what would it look like to make this an episode? And there were a couple podcasts that I was subscribed to that I really enjoyed. I liked the content. I liked the consistency of having something to listen to that was, outside of the realm of music, but also kind of spoke to my soul. And I was like, well, what would it look like if I did that too? Now, like Sid said, I have absolutely no background in like any type of audio, anything. The most I've ever done in audio is recorded myself on my phone with voice note or like sang in a microphone for church. That was pretty much it. That's the most. And one of my homeboys, Freddie, he told me, you should start a podcast. Or he said, I remember you saying that you wanted to start a podcast. How would you like to go about doing that? So I have a Mac, right? Don't really know the ins and outs of it. It's an old Mac from like 2014. I was told that I could use GarageBand to record myself talking, and then in GarageBand I could. And GarageBand, you better pay these two. You better pay these two for this. For this free advertisement. But long story short, figured out how to do that through YouTube, through those means. And when I got the first episode published, I was like, all right, this isn't hard. I've got the mic. I've got the editing tools. Let's get it. Let's keep doing it. And that's kind of how it began. So everything from my reflections to learning how to do that probably took me about a month to compile altogether. And then after that, once that 1 month was done and I got comfortable with it, just started pushing episodes out.
Nice.
Yeah. Now, I've been listening to your podcast, and I have to say I really enjoy it. And
thank you, bro.
No problem, of course. And I know you started the podcast, I believe, when the whole incident with George Floyd happened. Did that help you with motivating to create the podcast even more? Or was it just something that just you knew you had to do right there at that moment?
Definitely. So you're absolutely right in that the murder of George Floyd was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back with igniting that fuse for me to actually begin that. Just because a part of me being in ministry is being someone who likes to be a comforter for those who are around me. I don't seek out people to comfort, but it's just kind of one of those things that's just ingrained in me to want to be a resource of, I guess I can't think of another word except comfort. And so the podcast was the means for me to do that. But I was also really angry, kind of, when I first started it. So I was angry about George Floyd. I was going to protest. So I had a lot of action going on around me. And I was like, well, what does it look like to document this? And to also be authentic and transparent about what I'm feeling, being in this very, very largely white space where I was working, where I was ministering, where I was working with folks in ministry who don't really understand or have any direct connection or access to the larger black experience in this country. What does it look like to be my authentic self and what I'm feeling in this season through the use of that podcast? Great, thanks to, let me not say thanks to, but because of what happened to George Floyd. So you're absolutely right in saying that. And I'm glad you said that, Ann, because I totally forgot, not totally forgot, but being with the transition of the podcast and how far I've gone along with it, it's good to remember that and recall that information. So yeah, and be reminded of that.
Yeah, last year was a very crazy year. We had the murder of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and in all that, we also had a pandemic, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that changed the landscape for how we see a lot of things. It changed the landscape in our finances, our mental health. But I always wondered, how did that affect the churches, right? And I know you're a part of ministry, so do you know how certain churches are doing during the pandemic and like the aftermath? Like, do you see a lot of churches having to close their doors due to financial hardship because of the pandemic?
Man, bro, I've seen a little bit of it all. So like a lot of secular workspaces, and in the secular components of the church, in the very beginning, everyone was running around with their heads on fire because we were still in the very beginning stages of understanding the severity of the situation that came with the pandemic. So, in the very beginning, we were fed the pretty much the lie that said, it's not that serious. It's just like a common cold. You'll be fine. And then, you fast forward a month and we've lost hundreds of thousands of people to something that we were told was not that serious. So in that transition state, churches had to go into emergency mode and say, all right, we can't afford to not be present for people. So what does that look like? So I'd say up until March, I saw that a lot of churches were, they still kind of had their doors open because they too were subject to believing that the coronavirus was not really a serious threat. And then when it actually became more serious, they immediately closed their doors. And what I saw many ministers and pastors doing before they got before they formulated and orchestrated pre-recorded worship services is that they would go live. So they would go live either on Zoom or Facebook and kind of just say an encouraging word to folks. They'd prepare their sermons or whatever they needed to say and either pre-record it or just go live so that people could have direct access. I'd say by April, a lot of them got the swing of how to not only, because to be honest with you, a lot of seminaries don't prepare you, or I don't think anyone really foresaw a pandemic coming, at least to that size. And so they all had to acquire new skills technologically because no one prepared them to do so. So it was a very quick turnaround. They orchestrated services that they had pre-recorded, some that they would do live. But when it came to the physical touch component, when it comes to visiting people in hospice and in hospitals, where they were allowed, they would do so. And if they couldn't, what they would do is they would send notes of encouragement from members of the church and from themselves so that people could get them. Because you remember in the very beginning, hospices closed down to people visiting, nursing homes closed down to people visiting, hospitals closed down to people visiting because of how extreme and intense it was. So as things lightened up, the church kind of did pretty much what the rest of the world did, to be honest with you, to be able to reach folks. Now, a lot of churches, due to many folks being vaccinated, what seems to be the decrease of the threat of COVID, even though it's still very much around, churches are doing softer reopenings and giving people the option to come in person. It was never mandatory in the first place, but they're still also giving people the opportunity to view online, practicing social distancing. There are other churches in different parts of the country that have never observed social distancing in any way. And so I don't really know what their game plan is, but I do know that a lot of them have suffered losses, everything from their clergy leadership to the staff, parish folks, to the congregants. So they've kind of gone their own way. But for those who have been more observant of the safety of folks, that's kind of how it's gone since the beginning of the pandemic.
Gotcha.
That's interesting. I have never, before Anthony and I had talked about this before when we were formulating, what we wanted to talk to you about. I had never really thought about like the impact that the pandemic would have had on churches. And it has been interesting thing kind of seeing, kind of from an outside perspective, how they have kind of evolved to be able to handle a lot of these instances.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about that, and something, I mean, it connects to both the churches and like just people in general, especially during the time of the pandemic. Do you think that the churches have done that community's done a lot better about working with people who may have like mental health issues or things of that nature? Because I feel like with everybody being at home, a lot of those issues are exacerbated. Or if you didn't know you had like things to contend with, people are like realizing, oh my God, I can't do X, Y, or Z because I'm stuck at home. Like, what do I do with myself? And are kind of driving themselves crazy. Have you found, are there any programs that like some of the churches that you interact with have been kind of pushing forward to kind of help folks?
Absolutely. That's an excellent question. Simply because of the fact that, like you said, that there was just so much that the churches did not realize they would need to adjust to accommodate folks in the midst of not being able to be in person. So much of ministry is usually done in person. You can come to the pastor's office, you can come to the church, you can go to the hospital, you can go to the hospice, you can even outreach to the community. But what my church would do, I'm a part of Emory Fellowship, United Methodist Church in Washington, D.C. One thing I saw the clergy leadership in my church do was they leaned on the congregants who had expertise in certain fields to kind of guide that ship. So we have people at the church who are, like you said, bro, involved in mental health practice. So they leaned on them to kind of say, all right, we understand that there are people who need physical touch. There are many people who are introverts, but there are many more people who are like extroverted, who want to dap you up and say what's up and look at you in the face to see how you're doing. And when they can't do that, it's the end of the world for them. But also, as you were saying, there are more serious battles that people have that need to be addressed in the way that the church can handle it. So what they would do is they would have virtual workshops. Sometimes in the season of the marches, where we could and where it was allowed, we would gather social distance. We would do a social distance gathering, and just kind of be in community that way. But things like exercise programs through the church, different types of meetings, everything from outside of Bible study to simply check-ins, virtual game nights, virtual discussions on the importance of social distancing. And when the vaccines were first introduced, we had people who worked in the healthcare field come and discuss with the congregants the significance of the vaccine, because as you know, there are many folks who were and still are skeptical of the vaccine, its ability to protect and so on and so forth. But they would have them come and talk about it and kind of just share, why it was helpful, what was in it, so on and so forth, which was, honestly, I had not seen that from the church universal in such a consistent capacity until the pandemic happened. So I remember there being like workshops on physical health and mental health, but they would be few, far, and in between. But since, like you said, being home was so intense for people, because you think about it, you got to work from home, then you got to live at home, then some people have kids or animals, or a lot of people were tried in the last year. And so understanding that, leaning on the community to kind of steer that ship of what people needed is what I've seen my church and other churches do, which I think is excellent, because like what you all do, if you don't know how to lead any type of software systems or anything technological, then you need to find someone who does. And usually there are people within those congregations who are great at all of those things in different capacities. So that's kind of how it was addressed, and it's still being addressed until I hope that we continue to have virtual components for people because of how great they've been and how much ministry has expanded because of that. But we'll see. But I will say that churches have done all of what I've mentioned as far as like outreach and maintenance and everything.
That's actually super interesting, because I just think about like how the pandemic has forced people, organizations, workplaces to like evolve one way or the other to kind of like get with the times, and so to speak. Like, I mean, just thinking about how much for my job, I got my job last year. Well, formerly I was a contractor, but I got my job, last year, and I was in the office for about 2 months. And since then, I have been working from home, and there was a huge concern about it's not going to work. Like, it's it's not going to work. And organizations and businesses have been, I don't want to say thriving, but they've been fine, right? Like, if they're able to adapt, and that's kind of also changed the priorities of people, right? Because now it's like, I want to be able to spend time with my kids. I want to be able to spend time with my wife, my partner, whoever, and be able to have like this time to just be at home. And like, I also think with the churches, it's interesting because it allows them to have more reach to younger people, right? Who may just not want to go to they just may not want to go to church for whatever reason. They may not want to leave to go. Now, there are ways that you can build that community virtually, which I think is interesting, especially in that, in your field, but I feel like in every field now, right? Like, the amount of people that I know that use Discord that never would have used Discord 2 years ago is actually absurd. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to see like this development that comes out of like pain and suffering, so to speak.
You're absolutely right with that, because we've had to lean on, because all three of us are millennials, but it's usually, as far as the church is concerned, it was that age demographic that knew how to do a lot of the transition into online platforms. Millennials, Generation Z is the one after us, and so like you said, it involved and invoked a whole new type of partnership and involvement that didn't happen prior to, because, to be honest, it wasn't needed in the same capacity. And now that it was, you had to find things to keep people's interest, So Sid, I remember you came to, back last January, we had a, what was that? Like a vision board thing, right? It was right before the pandemic hit. But then we transitioned that to online, because that was something that we saw that younger folks had interest in. And like you both mentioned, in order to maintain someone's interest, you have to reach out, transition, accommodate, adapt, evolve, so on and so forth. And so, like you said, that pain and suffering caused that breaking and that evolution and kind of that muscle growth, because it required stretching and leaning on other people. So, yeah.
Yeah,
You both have some dope observations. Sorry.
I want to take it back to the podcast. What advice would you give someone that's looking to create their own podcast / brand?
Oh man, that's great. One of the biggest, I'll start with the lesson I learned. Find your target audience. So just for everyone who's listening, my podcast is now called the Soul Paramedic. It was originally called Heart, Mind, and Jugular. And what happened with Heart, Mind, and Jugular was the first few episodes acted like my diary. And so I found myself just kind of like vomiting into the mic, everything that I was feeling. And then people enjoyed that, but there was no audience. There was no theme. There was no audience. And so each episode was like, George Floyd, Dragon Ball Z is amazing. I went swimming today, and so it's like, dude, what are you doing here? And so when you have no audience or no targeted audience, it makes content creation very difficult for you, because you have nothing to build upon, because you're like, well, whatever happens, happens. And so if nothing happens, then what are you going to do? So when you want to start a podcast, make sure you have a targeted audience, make sure you have a theme, because that will make episode and content creation so much more interesting. So if your theme is the discussion of, like you both, all things, let's say, exciting anime, superheroes, comic books, games, or, just everything that falls into that realm, because it goes together so perfectly, you have your audience who likes those things. Whereas you're trying to talk about why the metro is great, or why you should fly planes, or why cats are amazing. It's too much. So definitely know your targeted audience, and make sure you have a theme that you're looking to speak to throughout the entirety of the podcast.
Yeah, one thing too about podcasting, and me and Sid had this conversation recently, is that you have to have some type of consistency, right? You have to have some type of consistency when it comes to promoting a podcast. You have to have some type of consistency when you come together as a team and you both are making sure you're grinding and making sure everything comes out right. I feel like if you don't have any type of consistency as well, anything you do, just take it outside podcasts, I feel like you're just making things harder on yourself. So that's one thing I learned with podcasting. Have there been any struggles that you faced?
Bro, oh my gosh. Let's go down the list. Okay, so because I didn't know these things, right? I was not consistent at first. So like I said, because I was just emoting, it was all based on how I felt. So if I felt nothing, then there would be no episode for 3 weeks, and when you have an audience and people who like your content, they want to know that this is going to, if it's not every week, at least it's every 2 weeks, or at least it's every month. They know your rhythm. I had no rhythm. So with that, I saw that my viewers would go up and down. And because I originally wasn't looking at numbers, there was a part of me that kind of didn't care, But if you're going to involve yourself in this type of work, you want to be consistent. Another struggle I had was that I was finding myself trying to hurry up and put out content. So there were a couple of episodes that I had released that were simply, I got to get this done episodes. And because the podcasting was something that I enjoyed, I didn't want it to turn into work. So I used resources like Buzzsprout, and there's some others I can't think of, but on YouTube, about how to, one, not experience burnout as a podcaster, because as you both know, when you're podcasting, you have to record it, you have to listen to it, you have to edit it, you have to upload it, and by the time usually you're done doing all of that and sifting through what you're going to use, what you're not going to use, you can be really exhausted, especially if it's just one or two of you doing the editing. It's not like you have like a team of editors, So being prepared for the fatigue that can come with it, but doing your best to try to make sure it's not fatigue. Another struggle that I had was I didn't take advantage of the opportunity to record more than one episode at once. So I would have one thing they'll tell you to do is if you can get ahead of the game, do it, because life comes up and life happens. And since I've been podcasting, I've lost folks to different things, which kind of set me back weeks, which is okay because life happens, but when you're using a platform and you're trying to keep people invested and you're trying to keep people, if your thing is encouragement, you want to keep people encouraged, you need to make sure that you have content ready to go. Every episode doesn't have to be an hour. Every episode doesn't have to be 20 minutes. Every episode doesn't even have to be 10 minutes, to be honest with you. But I learned a lot of things the hard way because people would ask me, when is another episode coming out? Or they had no way to reach me. So I had no way to communicate with my listeners. So I finally learned that I needed to create a Instagram. I made a Facebook page just so that I could keep people updated about what was going on. So on my Instagram, the Soul Paramedic podcast, if I'm going to be away, I put up a post. I put up a post when an episode is uploaded. I put up a post on the theme to expect. Because it keeps people engaged, and because I have no media training and none of these things, it was all stuff I learned the hard way. But also, the funny little thing that I learned is making sure that, and Sid taught me this, investing in a, boom arm for your microphone, depending on the type of microphone you have. As you can see, I talk with my hands a lot, so there was a lot of table hitting, and in the middle of me recording, you'd hear boom, Then I had the AC running. So you could hear the AC running in the background. You could hear the fan going. The acoustics weren't great. So make sure you got some dope acoustics. Make sure you invest in a mic that is good. Don't get it just because it's cheap. Speak to people who know about technology that goes with recording yourself. Like the both of you. Sid has given me tons of microphone advice. I have a Blue Yeti. It's great. I think it's great for the beginning stages of things. But there are others out there that can do, different things for different strokes for different folks and the different types of stuff you're trying to include within your episode. So with that whole mouthful of everything I just said, just to go back down the list, check your acoustics, invest in some good stuff. Make sure you have a theme, make sure you have your content. If you can get ahead of the game, that would be great. And be in communication with your audience as best you can, because they would like to have access to you depending on the type of theme you got going in some degree. Because you keep that relationship, they'll keep supporting and they'll keep sharing, and then next thing you know, you got hundreds of listeners each week or at least each month.
Yeah, I agree with that. Definitely agree with that. Another thing I want to ask, you mentioned the things that you struggle with. But what inspired you to start developing your own property about superheroes? Because Sid told me that's something that you're getting into, and I was like, oh, that sounds very interesting. And I always wondered, what kind of superheroes are you into, and what inspired you to develop that type of property?
Absolutely. So ever since I've been little, I've been into superheroes. I've loved anime superheroes, Marvel superheroes, DC Comics superheroes, Disney superheroes. I've just always been, even anti-heroes too. I think my first anti-hero love, and I think we can call him an anti-hero, was Godzilla, because sometimes he was saving, he was saving the city, and they were trying to fight him off. As a kid, I didn't really know how to wrap my head around it. I was like, but he's Godzilla. I also loved Mothra. But then after Godzilla and Mothra came, Batman and Superman were all. I think Batman and Superman had to be in everybody's childhood for the most part, But then like Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon and Xena Warrior Princess and Hercules, and man, my interest in superheroes and their stories are just across the board. I'd say in the past 6 years, I've been more directly involved in the stories of Black superheroes, because of the fact that I didn't really notice coming up either the significance of having them, in the sense of making sure their stories were told, but also how few that we had. So in retrospect, I think about Static Shock. And I think about I forget his last name, but the Black Green Lantern, in Justice League, Storm. That's all I can think of. Oh, Steel, and then a couple of others who are miscellaneous who I can't think of at this time. But I don't know. Sometimes it feels good to see people who kind of look like you in a different way. But generally, when it comes to it, my jump off is I love cosmic stories. I love things that have to do with space. I absolutely love Galactus and Nova and Silver Surfer. I loved, the Dark Phoenix saga. I loved the Power Cosmic, the Living Tribunal. You just got me really excited. So I also love I love the Spectre. I love Dr. Fate and the story of Naboo. I loved what was his name? Black Adam. I got into comic books more so when I was a teenager, like my first year of high school, and I was reading Infinite Crisis. If you both remember Infinite Crisis,
yep.
I loved Infinite Crisis. I would run to the comic book shop that was all the way in Manhattan, which was nowhere near close to me, to go buy. I think it was released either every week or every 2 weeks sometimes. I don't know where they are now. They're somewhere in my apartment back home in Brooklyn, but I had 8 issues of it. Because I also loved villain stories, because villains are cool. You know what I mean?
I agree.
Yeah.
Even in the Bible, people want to know what's going on with the devil and why is he evil and why are there demons? Being good is, that's great, that's cool, but people want to know, well, why is this person evil, or why are they bad, or what's their backstory? And you find out a lot of them started out good, which is even cooler, because you're like, well, damn, why did you turn bad? And now you're invested. So I hope I answered your question, but I love just anything cosmic, anything superpower that has to do with weather and earth and blah blah blah, and then of course Dragon Ball Z, which is a mixture of all those things, and kaijus. So I have no theme, to be honest with you. I'm kind of just imagination land.
Nothing wrong with that. Sometimes you gotta let your imagination run wild.
Yeah. I relate to that 100%. Yeah. Actually, I have something that you might appreciate. That's Godzilla related. You know what? Hold up 1 sec. It'll take me 2 seconds.
Oh man, what is he gonna bring out?
Look, I found this online, and I did not know that Magic the Gathering had a huge Godzilla set that came out last year. And basically, there are a bunch of cards that are renamed, but they're King Ghidorah, Mothra, Destroyer, all cards.
Man.
So they also made freaking playmats and freaking card sleeves for these, bro. And I was like, yo, this is the coolest. I have never bought anything Magic the Gathering in my life because I don't care about that card game. But when I saw some Godzilla stuff, I said, I'm ordering that right now. So, I know it's a total sidebar, but bruh, for the folks who come through on the streams, you see this stuff all the time. But I was hyped as shit.
Man, I love it. I love
bro. Over a playmat.
Oh,
I love it.
You want to know how excited Sid gets over Godzilla? He spent $60 on a Godzilla game for PlayStation, and the game was absolutely horrible. But Sid did not care because he got to play as Godzilla. And I'm sitting here oh my god.
Man, I didn't even know Sid loved Godzilla so much. You know what I mean? I was like, is it just me?
Bro, it doesn't end there. It doesn't end there. So Digimon tournament, I have got Shin Godzilla sleeves, bro. On my Digimon cards, and my baby Digimon got Baby Godzilla. Like, this is so perfect. So, like,
But
look.
they made Baby Godzilla look extremely much cuter than like the 1960s
Yeah, right?
version. You know, like oh my gosh, I almost didn't pay my electric bill to buy this King Ghidorah like. It's not a statue. It's like one of those like. How do you refer to them? They're like more expensive action figures. So,
like a bust or like a collectible, like a Is it the
so you know
figures
how, like,
that you have to
some of the,
put
like,
together?
not put together. So it's like I mean, like you have to pop like two legs in. But it's
Oh,
like if you think
okay.
about like the you know the new Dragon Ball Z action figures they released where you could change like the face and the arms but they come with the stand. It's just a larger version of that.
Oh,
Okay, I have a Godzilla like that. Yeah.
See, I was like, do I want to not pay my electric bill for this ultimately adulting one? But on the inside, King Ghidorah was going to be like sitting up on a mantle somewhere. So
yes, I respect it.
I'm
I
right there
respect
with
it.
you.
So
let the cash flow come in. They're going to be all over the place.
But yo, I had to segue into that because Godzilla's my boy. Okay, I love me some Godzilla. But if we're talking about versus, listen, I gotta ask you a question. Marvel or DC?
Man,
And if you need to break it into different themes like cartoons, comics, and movies, I respect that. Because I do think that there are levels to this. I don't think it's as cut and dry personally. But if you feel like it is, I won't stop you. But if you need to break it into sections, I also respect that.
It's definitely not cut and dry for me. So I'll break it up into themes. Live action films, Marvel hands down. Animated films, I found myself more drawn to DC anime. They're animated films. I think they do a phenomenal job with the different stories they tell. One of my favorite ones, I don't know the name of it, is where Supergirl is kidnapped by Darkseid, and then he takes her to Apocalypse, and she's getting trained by the. You know which one I'm talking about.
That was a good Superman movie.
Is it like Batman, Superman, Apocalypse? It's because it's got Wonder Woman and it's got Batman. I think so, something like that.
They're like fighting the Furies and Big Barda's in it and everything.
Yeah.
That's one of my it's one of my favorite ones that I've seen, and I've yet to see like I'll be fair, the animated Marvel films, I don't really know if there are any. I'm sure there are, but they've not really caught my attention like the DC films. So I always found out about the DC films first. Live action, Sid may cut my head off for this. I did enjoy Batman versus Superman, mainly because I was in the movie theater when it happened and Wonder Woman first appeared on the screen and the theme came out and everything. Let's see. I'll say the storylines I enjoy from each. So from Marvel, I love their cosmic storylines. Everything from, the one above all is Marvel, and I think who's for DC? That's like the Presence or something, right? Or like the two different names for God. So I think Marvel is the one above all, and
I can't remember for DC because DC also is weird in the sense that they actually acknowledge like Judeo-Christian, like the Judeo-Christian God. So I don't know if he is God in DC because the Spectre is also super OP too. So I haven't looked in. I'll Google it while you talk.
I know Darkseid's considered a God entity, but I don't know who it is considered like on
like the God. Right. Yeah.
You know what? I'll also make it simple. I prefer Marvel over DC, and I'll say why. I think Marvel does a better job at making people, and this is a very general point, but I think it does a better job at speaking to the humanity of its characters. So like, you have the mutants, who are very much from this planet. They are, people with superpowers who have to deal with the discrimination. They got to deal with violence against them, all while also wanting to defend people who hate their guts. You know what I mean? And even though there are some terrible mutants, they aren't terrible just to be terrible. They're the products of a society that deems them dangerous because of the fact that they're learning how to use their powers. I absolutely love that about the X-Men, because the X-Men also involve themselves in the like real history of Earth, even though it's falsified. But so you'll think about them, fighting during World War II, or the fact that what's his name? Is it Apocalypse? Apocalypse, right? Apocalypse is the
the mutant, the original mutant.
Oh, sorry.
Yes,
Apocalypse.
You think about DC,
so the
right?
Fact that he was in ancient Egypt. You know what I mean? And that's another thing. You think Apocalypse the planet, Apocalypse the mutant. But I love that about Marvel, because even in the films, you can see that these people are like regular folks who have inherited, either they've had superpowers or they've inherited some type of family blessing or some type of something where they have to now take on this not only persona but this duty to protect all life that, you know, prior to they were riding in Lamborghinis, being a doctor who was losing the ability to use their hands. You know, no disrespect to Doctor Strange, but I like that about Marvel, and I think that Marvel does a better job in my very not expertise opinion in showing the humanity of people. I think that though Gotham is great, there's some aspects of Gotham that are just really, really, really extreme. You know, Sid, don't shoot me with your laser vision because I see how you're looking at me.
What? No, I don't disagree.
But yeah, okay. So if I have to say X-Men or Justice League, X-Men. If I have to say DC Cosmic or Marvel Cosmic, Marvel Cosmic. If I have to say the multi-dimensional aspect between Marvel and the multi-dimensional aspect between DC, definitely Marvel. I don't know. There's just something so much more humane. Not humane. Humane is the wrong word. Humanity.
Like human.
Humanity relational with Marvel than you get with DC. Because if you think about it, Superman's from another planet. You know, Wonder Woman is an Amazon. You know, Batman is rich. You know, or was rich and still is rich. You know, I'll stop there because I'm rambling at this point. But those are the things that I enjoy between the two of them. But if I had to pick one, I would pick Marvel.
I would pick Marvel. And this is not me being biased. Like, I think that, like, what you're saying to me makes a lot of sense, right? Like, it's not coming from a place. I just like it because I like it. Like, for me, that's why I enjoy more Marvel things than DC, is because I feel like I'm connected to the characters much easier than I am with the DC characters. I feel like with DC characters, I like them because they're fucking cool. Like Batman and like all his characters, I like them because they're cool, not because I feel like a connection to them, right? I mean, there's a few that are different, like the black characters, like right. Green Lantern specifically, because he's a brother that was in the Marines. Like that, I connect with him because, you know, my dad was in the Navy, But like, there are very few characters that I feel like I can say, I relate to you and I understand your struggle as a person because you're an actual person. But, oh, and yes, it's the presence. You were right. The presence is the equivalent of like the one above all in Marvel. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like, I would kind of say the same thing. It really just depends on, like, what we're talking about. Like, I think DC's animation is amazing. Like, I really wish the people who worked on DC's animated films got the ability to work on their live-action stuff. Because I honestly, God, believe that if that happened, DC and Marvel would be like this all the time. Like, I think that they'd be constantly doing the up and up and trying to outdo each other because whoever they get to write and head that stuff is a freaking genius. Because they're fun. And, like, they're fun and they're dark at the same time, and you're like, this works, right? And like, I don't know, I think, and I feel like a lot of people that I've talked to in the past that kind of say they like Marvel and have an actual conversation about it, that's the reason, is what you just said of like, I feel like I connect with the characters more. And I'm like, that's fair. I don't think that is a inaccurate, you're coming from a place that's total BS statement. Personally.
And you know, like, I think about like when I want super fantasy, like this could never happen in our reality, I gravitate towards DC.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because it's like some things with DC of the storylines that I do know are just so magical and mystical that it's almost like, man, this would never ever happen. You know, whereas I could see, now it'd probably be to a much lesser degree, you know, but I could see someone becoming a Black Cat, you know what I mean? Or becoming a, let's see, who else is a little more
like
realistic?
Iron Man?
Like an Iron Man,
at
you
this
know?
point.
Maybe even a Doctor Strange. Now, maybe not on that, you know, to that degree, but I don't know, bro. There's always been something, and there could be a bias that I'm expressing because of the fact that I've seen live action films of Marvel, so it has become more real to me, you know?
That's fair.
But then also, you know, I just think Marvel's just kind of for the cool kids, you know. Don't get me wrong, DC's great. DC is great. But when I saw Shazam in 2019 and I saw what came out in 2019? So many things came out in 2019. Endgame came out in 2019, right? Yeah. Endgame.
Sure, yeah.
Endgame and Shazam. Two totally different movies. But Shazam was more, and it could have been the way that they were directed. Shazam was more like, it almost felt satirical, whereas Endgame was like, man, damn, this is it. Like, we all need to get up and help them fight Thanos. Like, it is about to go down. Are y'all down to ride? You know what I mean? And I just wish DC did films better. But I digress.
So, Sid's gonna probably say I'm biased, but it's not biased. to me, I like DC comics better, and just the storylines of DC. And I feel like, although Marvel gives you that humane connection, I still feel like the storylines and story arcs for DC are phenomenal. I feel like, to me personally, I feel like nothing in Marvel is going to touch Batman's Longest Halloween or Under the Red Hood. And that's just my opinion.
That's fair. Like, and those are two really good stories too, though. Like I think, yeah.
And I feel like DC has more and more of those great stories. Like, people just think of Batman right away. But if you look at DC's Flashpoint and think of the concept of Flashpoint, I feel like nothing in Marvel is touching that, in my opinion. Like, I get what you guys say about the human connection, because I was telling Sid, like, if there was anyone in Marvel that I would relate to, the only character I feel like I could relate to in Marvel is Spider-Man, because Spider-Man actually struggles as a human being, right? Yeah, he fights, he goes out and fights superheroes and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, he's still struggling to pay his rent. He's still struggling to pay his electric bill, figuring out how to eat, and then on top of that, he has to worry about saving the city, fixing his costume, getting some type of money. Yeah, everyday type of stuff. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's the only type of human connection in the Marvel series I get. But I just like DC for their storylines and their art direction that they go towards. I do love the X-Men. I do like X-Men because of what you stated earlier, how the discrimination they're going through. And I believe when Stan Lee was creating X-Men or working with X-Men, it was a rumor, I don't know if it's entirely true, but they try to break it down between like Professor X as Martin Luther King and Magneto as Malcolm X. And when I sat down and thought about it, I was like, you know what? That does kind of make sense, because even though people portray Magneto as a villain, people also portray Malcolm X as a villain because of his way of thinking. And people praise Professor X as a hero because of how Martin Luther King went about his ways of attacking racism. So I give Marvel praises for that. But like with DC, like I said, I just feel like it's hard touching DC storyline. And even the latest stuff right now that's coming out, like with the direction they're going with Batman, I feel like the new Batman arc is just amazing. Like,
that's fair.
Right now they're in a situation where Batman lost all his money, right? Bruce Wayne lost all his money, and he's trying to stop this crime syndicate. And he's starting to realize that everyone is watching everyone because of how advanced technology is getting. And I feel like, wow, that's kind of what we're going through right now. Like, everything is being monitored through technology or some type of app or some type of cell phone tracking. So yeah, I'll get off my rant, but that's how I feel
that's fair.
When it comes between Marvel and DC. And I'm not slighting Marvel at all. Like, DC's not touching their movies, at least not for a long time until at least till Warner Brothers gets their act together, which probably will happen with this shakeup. And I say probably.
right. We're hoping.
Yeah, we're hoping. But right now you're not touching Marvel's live action movies, and I also do think DC video games are much better than Marvel's. But then again, there's not really too many DC characters in video games. It's mainly Batman.
Yeah.
And then like the Injustice story and games. But that's my opinion, though.
You know, I think the interesting thing about what you said too is, and I think this is why for me, it's both the reason why for me DC is like secondary, is because Batman is that man for DC. Like, to me, and like I feel like if somebody bought Batman from DC, I would never look at DC again. I'm gonna be totally honest with you. And that's not to say that other characters aren't interesting. It's just something about Batman. When they write his stories, they still find a way to find this man's stories interesting. When you know he gonna win because he Batman, he got prep time. But you're still like I feel like he's the only character, despite his money, that still feels like a human. And it could be because of everyone around him, like his whole story with like Talia al Ghul, with the whole like, you know, finding love, losing love, etc., etc. She's a villain. They have a baby. It's a whole other thing. His relationship with Ra's al Ghul, who's kind of like this pseudo uncle father figure to him, but also like, so, you know, someone he has to combat with all the time. Like his relationship with the Joker, like his character relationships, I think, are so unique among all of comic books, personally. And so like I see what you're saying about like Marvel's not touching those stories. I mean, I think Marvel isn't right. I feel like, to me, I don't think Marvel has a character in my mind that if they lost, I wouldn't be interested in the property anymore, if that makes sense, right? So it's like a weird sort of thing of like, yes, I love Spider-Man. However, I found now that when I buy comics for the past 2 years, I've only really been reading Donny Cates' run on Venom. I read Spider-Man. Spider-Man is my favorite character, but like, there are other characters I read, but I feel like with Marvel, like they have like that Batman effect, but it like shifts to different characters depending on the time of year, and each of those individual stories don't feel as good as some of those key Batman stories, but they do this thing where they like shuffleboard, and they're like, this is still a really good story, but right now the premiere story is this person or this person or this person. So yeah, no, I really hope that like that love that whoever is working on Batman right now, and some of those folks who are working on some of those DC properties gets introduced to the live action world of DC, because I think that superhero movies as a whole will be elevated to another level, which I think is what we collectively as a fandom of both DC and Marvel, fuck the whole arguments of like which is better, and like people like actually getting upset about those arguments. But like I feel like once DC is elevated, like all of comic books will be like just pushed to another level, because right now I feel like Marvel goes through this thing of, oh, well, they're owned by Disney, so of course they're gonna be good, or oh, they're owned by Disney, so I'm not gonna be interested in superheroes in general. They're all, you know, Disney-fied, which is, I think, BS. But that's a whole other thing. Like, I really hope that like that love that we can have for Batman gets to transcend those characters, like his character, and start to see that in other things, because. Yeah, no, I'll get off my soapbox too, but like I don't know, I just find that interesting, like that you said that, Anth, because like I 1,000,000% agree. Like I don't know what it is about Batman, but this character is interesting consistently.
So
no, please go ahead.
Oh, sorry. You go. You can go.
Oh no, I was just gonna say also with the conversation with the DC Marvel thing, I think that it's like you have to compare Marvel to everybody else in DC minus Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. Like they're like the three titanic characters that no matter how great or awful a movie was, or you know, they will make money, and they are just like, you just can't compare them to anybody. Like you were saying, Sid, Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman to me have no equals in Marvel. It's like Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, and
like Luther Vandross. You're not comparing
Luther Vandross, or like you know, like Elvis or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
They just have, though they have contemporaries. Like to me, the only person I could think of from Marvel that could even like stand next to them in their titanic superhero-ness would be Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So, though Wolverine is cool, it's like.
Yeah.
When you go generally around the world, everybody knows Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. Now, a big part of that is because they've been around forever, since the dawn of our grandparents. You know, but it's like, all right, let's remove those three and then let's compare everybody else, because it's like you you just can't compare them to anybody, and it's I mean, they've earned that right, just character wise, and what we've seen from them, and I will say Batman does have the best storyline of the three in my opinion for sure, because he just he can't be touched. But yeah, when it comes to just like, nah, I don't see it.
I think the ironic thing too is that like, I don't know what the numbers are like now. Like I used to know them, but I haven't looked in a couple years. But like in terms of financial superhero dumb whatever, Spider-Man, Batman, and Superman are the most profitable. I mean, I think Spider-Man right now makes more money than the other two, and that's probably just because he's in Disney's hands, so he's everywhere. But like, ironic, it's interesting to think about that. Like, right? Like, I feel like the big three idea in Marvel doesn't exist in the same way. Like, there's properties people like, but the only one that I think transcends Marvel's brand as a whole and can still be absurdly successful is Spider-Man. Meanwhile, for DC, they have 3 flagships. Yes, one is clearly better than the other 2, I think, financially. But like, yeah, it is interesting to kind of, and I think you're right. It's because DC's old as hell. Like DC 1944, I think, is when this first Superman comic came out. Was it 44?
That's the year my grandmother was born. My grandmother was born in that year,
Yeah.
Literally.
This is going to be the last rant before I have my next question. But like Sid mentioned earlier, like if Batman was taken out
1938
for Superman. Wow, that's crazy.
Wow.
Sid mentioned earlier that if Batman was taken out of the DC picture, that he probably wouldn't care too much about DC. But even though I love Batman and Sid knows my fandom for Batman, I will say this though, I do like the mythos of Superman much better than I do Batman. And if you want to like a simple quick breakdown of that mythos, watch Kill Bill volume 2 towards the end, when I forget the name, Uma Thurman meets Bill. I forget her character. I was just watching. Bride. Yeah. What if you go on YouTube, just watch that end clip and how Bill explains the mythos of Superman. That's exactly the reason why I love the mythos of Superman. And I feel like not too many comic books touch that mythos too much. So, but that's just my opinion.
For those who don't know, for context, what Bill's basically his argument, and I've actually seen people argue whether he's right or not. Like fans argue whether he's right or not, which I find fascinating. But for those of you who don't know, who have not seen Kill Bill, that's volume 2, right? 2? Is it 3 volumes? Yeah, there's 2. Okay. Okay.
2, yeah.
At the end, basically, he makes the argument that Superman's disguise is Clark Kent, and that his true self is like Superman, and that basically he's pretending to be like a human, and like that's his struggle type of thing. Right? That's basically what he's explaining.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. And I've seen people make the counter argument saying that that's not true. I don't know. I mean, me personally, I don't like or dislike his comparison. I think it's an interpretation, and I don't think it's right or wrong. I just think it's an interpretation. And I haven't read enough Superman to like to have an opinion personally. The only Superman that I've really gotten into is the animated cartoon and then Smallville. And for me, because of the way Smallville is, I don't entirely fall into Bill's thought process, because in watching Smallville my entire like being my thing for Superman, I'm used to him like being a human and not feeling like it's like a disguise. But that's a whole other thing. But go ahead with your question, Anth. I just wanted to put that context in there for anybody who had not seen Kill Bill, and if you haven't, you need to.
Yeah, very good movie. But back to you, Elijah.
This has been fun.
Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, it's been real fun. One of the questions I have for you is, what do you tell someone, or what advice would you give to someone that's looking to build a relationship with God, and or whatever higher power, where should they start?
I would say, firstly, throw everything away that teaches you that you have to be terrified, fearful, anything that makes you feel like you are enslaved in some contract that has built resentment within you. and allow an authentic exploration of your relationship with the Creator, to grow and to expand. Though I am Christian, I was raised that way. There was a lot that I had to unpack and unlearn myself, from the way that I viewed people, to some of the harsh, because life is so not black and white. When you're taught that a lot of it is black and white, and then you begin to live things, and you begin to experience things, and you begin to love people who go through things that you were once taught were black and white, you recognize the nuance that exists within existence. And so you can't do things like dislike someone because of, anything that makes us diverse, and anything in any of that type of diversity that we were taught was wicked or evil or this or that, And so a lot of human opinion has polluted the relationships, the individual relationships that we can form with God, because you always have someone telling you you're not doing it right. You always have someone telling you you need to do this, you should be at this place, and God's not happy with you because of this. And a lot of people like to think of themselves as a mouthpiece for God. So one thing I do as a minister is I never claim to speak for God ever. I always, as Sid said, when I'm delivering a sermon on a scripture, it's always my interpretation that I believe that God has given me, or God has influenced me to share with folks, is what it is. But I never say that what I'm saying is coming from God, because I know that this is my interpretation. And even though I may say that it's been guided by the Holy Spirit, it's how I feel the Holy Spirit has guided me. So I would say, because that's it's an amazingly broad but wonderful question. If there is anything that you resent, don't continue to practice it. If there's anything that you feel is being forced on you, step away from it. If there's anything that you feel has made you feel as if God is displeased with you because of how you are, how you look, how you're living, take control of that narrative, and in the best way you can, erase that and find some folks, if you're able to, who are theologically sound, because there are people out there who understand the not only the nuance in existence, but the diversity that exists within life and the experiences that we all have, who could act as guide sources. So in wherever you're called, I would say not only do your research deeply about it before you jump into it, see if the beliefs line up with you. For Christians in particular, you don't have to go by the doctrine of the church. If you believe in the Bible and you believe it as the word of God, that is your foundation. Your pastor's great, your associate pastor's great, great, but don't forget that those are people. Even if you're exploring Buddhism, if you're exploring Islam, if you're exploring Judaism, if you're exploring Taoism, or any one of the isms that we know that exist, or any spiritual practice, I urge people to always deeply invest in studying what it is that you believe or why you are joining this practice. I urge people not to join something simply because it only makes them feel good. We should feel good, but I think that anything that we involve ourselves in spiritually should also challenge us. It should challenge parts of ourselves. It should challenge our ignorances. It should challenge the way that we view people in the world in harmful ways. It should challenge the lack of drive that we may have for ourselves. And I'm not talking about just like accolades and achievements, but treating yourself well, loving yourself well, being good to yourself. Be a part of something, if anything at all, that feeds you in the ways that lift you up, in the ways that confront things about yourself, in the ways in which you can build positive community. Because I think that anywhere in life, we're not meant to walk life alone in any capacity, no matter what you believe or don't believe in. And make sure that you have those things in line. And I think that as long as you are being authentically you, and when I say authentically you, I mean the best version of yourself. If you're a jerk and you're nasty and you're rude and you're this and you're that, this advice is not for you. I urge you to change, because horrible people are not great to deal with. But not only that, when you talk about frequencies and energy, we can be so much better than we are in a lot of ways, and in a lot of ways that we treat people. So challenge yourself, be with something that challenges you in a positive way, something that opens you up to conversations with other people. And when it comes to God, I think that my personal belief is that you don't have to seek God. I think that God, you do seek relationship, but I think that God is always revealing God's self to us. And I've seen that be a multitude of ways: music communities, films, artistic expression. For some people, it is church. For some people, it's not church. Nature, everything. God, to me, God is in everything. So God can reveal God's self to you in the way that directly speaks to who you are, as long as you remain authentically who you are. I think that's the best thing you can do. Because we always have to change ourselves for a lot of different things that we're in, you know. But personally, I believe that God wants all of you, you know, all of your great parts, all of your ugly parts, you know, all of your great experiences and your not so great experiences, the good things you've done and the bad things you've done. And don't let anybody tell you any different. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's Joel Osteen. I don't care if it's T.D. Jakes. I don't care if it's, I'm sorry that I'm name dropping, you know, but don't let anybody tell you differently. Seek for yourself. And I think once you seek for yourself, you will find what you need.
I agree with that, like, a lot, because I think of my journey, when it comes to Christianity, like, there's a lot of stuff, that I was told that we shouldn't be doing, because, like you said, everything's so black and white, you know. But growing up and just learning people in different cultures, I feel like that helped me open up more to my Christianity and just opening up to God more. But is he there?
Elijah,
Yes, I'm here, bro. Sorry, I went
okay.
to sorry, I saw that it was getting kind of dark, so I didn't want to
Oh, okay.
sorry, but I was listening, and I heard everything that you were saying.
All good. Yeah. I was just saying that what you said earlier, that's how I felt with my walk towards Christianity and getting closer to God. It's just not taking everything for black and white, but just learning how the world really is and learning how to treat people better, and just learning about different cultures and other religions as well too, because I feel like even though certain religions are different from how Christianity is taught, you still could learn from those religions as well to help you grow your faith in God even more. So that's what I learned during my walk, and I'm still learning. I mean, I feel like with Christianity, you're always learning something, and you're always like, there's always some type of journey that you have to take to get closer to God, I feel like.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And be wary of anyone who tells you that they have it all figured out. Be wary of anyone who, you know, who claims to know how God feels, and you know, because it's like, well, you don't know. You know what I mean? You're assuming. And also, you should not be so bold as to speak to an experience that you have never experienced, unless you are invited to do so, and in such confidence when you don't know exactly the experience and the particularity of what this person is dealing with in this moment. And so, you know, the two greatest commandments in Christianity is, one, love your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul. The second commandment is like it, you know, loving your neighbor as yourself. So that means that the only way to love your God with all your heart and all your mind and all your soul is to love your neighbor in the same way. So as you were saying, Ant, like, if you don't agree with someone, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to hate them and burn them up. And, you know, we've seen horrendous things done. I will never deny the horrendous things that have been done in the name of Jesus, because they were done by people. And we know that wherever there are people, there are horrible things that are done. There are mistakes that are done, just because it's just the nature of humanity. But many things have been done wrong, primarily, you know, slavery. Not only that, do you think about the doctrine of discovery, you know, when it comes to the eradication of native persons in this country. Then you think about the Salem witch trials, you know, and burning women at the stake, and the Crusades. You know, there's so much that has been done wrong because people want to be the dominant, they want to be the authority, be in the place of God. And so they've taken on these holy crusades, for lack of a better term, because they think that the approach that they're doing is one that is reminiscent and reflective of loving your neighbor as yourself, and in that regard, loving God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul. Well, you can't be. But then, you know, there's a whole another topic we could get into about the lack of education that people had, and, you know, the fact that they were guided by people in the church who were educated but misguided them, and all the lying and stuff that took place. The bottom line is, like you were saying, you know, your job, I think the only job you have in this life is to love people authentically and fully. And that love looks like supporting people. That love looks like when you're invited, confronting people, not to make them a display of any sort, or to put them on trial. But as with Sid and I, if there's something that I got going on, and Sid and I are close, and I've confided in him with it, and I've opened that door, which is the key thing. I've opened that door for him to come in to give me his thoughts and his feelings about what it is that I'm doing. That's a part of love too, because that's that confrontational, transformative love. But that's only when invited. That looks like being there for people, simply being there. You don't always have to have an answer. You don't always have to have an explanation. Sometimes you just need to be there with people. That looks like being self-sacrificial. That looks like being, as you were saying, Anthony, being willing to have those difficult conversations and your change of your mind. Because ignorance is comfortable. Honestly, being ignorant is probably the most comfortable thing you can be in this world. You don't have to grow. You know that you're right. You don't have to do any better. You just get to be, and that's just it. Yeah. But we're called to higher, and I think that to find God is to love God, and to love God is to love God's people in this world, regardless of the things that separate us. And sometimes you got to tear stuff up. Loving God is also, and loving people is also confronting authorities and folks who mean harm to folks in any capacity. And so yeah. Soapbox.
No, I mean, I think that's good advice, and important, because I know my relationship kind of like has gone from, I mean, I wouldn't even say religious, right? Like I personally hate that term on a personal level, just because of my own experiences, and more like focusing on like spiritual kind of growth and development, which I think oftentimes people like, oh, what does that mean? Like, oh, you don't believe? Like, no, that's not what that means. It just means that like I personally don't, it's not that I don't see the value, but like I don't subscribe to going to church all the time. Why? Because I don't trust freaking people. Why? Because I've been so used to people trying to push ideas onto you that's like completely turned me off to even allowing you the opportunity. Unless I already know you and have a relationship with you individually, I don't want to talk to you about it, because I don't trust you in that way. Because as a younger person, I already trusted, I would say, the wrong people into kind of like my spiritual growth, and that kind of like fucked me up, point blank period. Like kind of like really put me in like a really confused, that don't make no sense kind of place. Like now, like I think as, not just in terms of like your growth specifically, like, with a Christian God, whatever you believe is kind of like that higher power. I think you also can't, like, don't be afraid to like read into things that people would say is like stigma, right? Like me personally, like I've read into things, like I know all kinds of things about hoodoo, voodoo, about Wicca, about like all these things that you would consider like occult, air quotes. And I can tell you, like, there is a lot of really interesting knowledge and a lot of really interesting parallels to like the Bible, the Quran, the Old Testament. Like there's a lot of stuff in there like, yeah, well, this is interesting because some of the things that have been stripped from the Bible, like, live on in these other ways. Or, even especially as like African Americans, thinking about like before we were ever introduced to Christianity, we had a whole belief system and different tribes and different practices and a whole other way of doing things, that it's interesting to me how well they actually mesh together, that they actually don't have to compete. And I feel like a lot of times people think I have to pick one or the other. I personally don't think you do. I mean, obviously you can't say like technically you can't say that you're like a Satanist and like a Christian at the same time, right? Like that doesn't really mesh together, unless like you do a lot of finessing, because ironically, Satanism and Luciferianism are two different things. Fun fact. And that even Satanism isn't necessarily about like what you see like in movies where like people are like sacrificing goats and shit. Like that's like a whole other thing. But you wouldn't know that without doing the research. And like you said, like I feel like people oftentimes are comfortable being ignorant. They're comfortable with kind of whatever they're fed and like, oh, okay, it's fine. I'll just go with that. And like I think that's important, like you both said, in your kind of spiritual and religious journey, is like, don't be afraid to read something that somebody told you like you shouldn't. Just because somebody said to you, oh no, like that's not of value, doesn't mean that that's true, but like I kind of digress. I mean that kind of leads into this next point of like, for you, have you ever struggled with like your faith, or you're like, this journey with Christianity, because of how it has been used historically on specifically people of color, but especially like black folks, in justifying freaking slavery? Like, has that ever kind of been something that's been hard to kind of not even reconcile, but to kind of like maneuver around, especially when you're if you're in a predominantly white like church space? Has that ever kind of come up?
My faith is a continual struggle for me, just because confronting the not so great side of humanity, and the reasons why we do what we do, and the reasons why, it just does not register with everyone in the world that it's not good to be not good to people or to the earth. And I understand that there are different things that make people do the things that they do. It sometimes boggles me that such things are allowed to continue to persist. Now, again, like I said, I'm not God. I don't speak for God, but just the different types of issues that we see that, to me, racism, something like racism is so wicked that it goes beyond my personal opinion, the human capacity to make it continual. So, in my faith, obviously, I do believe in, spiritual forces in high places that, negatively impact people and so on and so forth. And I know we can get into that totally another time.
Right.
But there's just some stuff that is just so horrible that we do as people, or that we become the vessels for things to do, that it fatigues me sometimes, And throughout the Bible, you see different types of prophets and spiritual leaders and people who have this struggle. God calls them to something. In the beginning, they're like, yes, let's go do it. Let's get this. I'm going to confront this king who's been sacrificing babies in the name of this deity, and we're doing this and blah, blah, blah. And then as they're in the middle of their story in the confrontation, Moses being one, Elijah being another, Jesus even, there's this level of fatigue in this part of the story where Moses goes hiding in the mountains, Elijah goes hiding in the desert, Jesus goes to the Garden of Gethsemane, and he's asking God, why are you letting this happen to me? And I think that those are just the natural ebbs and flows of faith, because you have great moments, where like you see God existing in people, or you see the love of God manifesting in the ways that we love on each other and support each other. And then you see something horrible happen, like a war or a terrorist attack, or, if we want to go back 50, 60 years, a nuclear bombing, where you're just like, how could you do something like this to people in the name of money, in the name of resources? And then you think, why are you letting this happen? But then you think about the nature of free will and the fact that we have it, and that as humans, we can either do right with the power that we have, or we can do wrong. So for a long time, the issue of the transatlantic slave trade and its relationship with Christianity upon Africans being brought to this country bothered me for a long time, because I didn't know that their Christianity had predated European influence in Africa. That aside, because I don't have a heart that believes in forcing anyone to believe anything or to do anything that outside of what they feel led to, or they're comfortable to, or in the time that they feel that they need to do it organically. I wrestled with that because of the fact that it was a complete erasure of everything that they knew. They broke up the families. Then they had people, having children with each other all over the place so that they could further disrupt it. Then they took away their culture. Then they took away their names. Then they put them in this land that they had no business, not no business, but they put them in this land they were probably not familiar with, and spread them out, just so that they could weaken them altogether. And they used Christianity, I forget the scripture, but the one passage in particular that says, slaves obey your masters, to justify what they were doing. But the types of, and slave is not a great word, but the types of capacities of slavery in the way that they understood it in the Bible, and the way that they interpreted it in America, well, I guess colonial America at the time, were two totally different things. So, slave meant servant. There have always been servants. There have always been, in the hierarchy of the ancient societies, there have always been those who were well-to-do, and then those who unfortunately were crushed under the hill of what I think is probably ancient capitalism. But because I've always seen humanity throughout history, including and excluding Christianity or any one of the Abrahamic religions or any one of the modern religions that we practice, there have always been people mistreating people simply because of where they were located geographically, because of how they looked, because of who they were related to, because of feudal, frivolous things like, wanting more women or wanting more land. We've always mistreated each other for the stupidest things. So when I think about the ways in which we've hurt each other in the past, it does not shock me that Christianity would be used as a tool of oppression for people, because of the fact that people have always done super, super horrible things. And that's one of the things that brought me peace with it, because I've looked at the message of Jesus more than I've looked at the actions of people, because of the fact that I know that in anything where you deal with people are going to upset you. They're going to do something stupid. They're going to get something wrong, and they may abuse the system that they are part of. So, for instance, you think of an organization. Let's say a fraternity, for example. Now, fraternities and sororities are supposed to be based in community service, upbuilding those who are involved in it, so that they can go on and go out and do that further. Right? That's what they say. Now, that's how they start. But then you have people who join, who like the influence they get as being members of the fraternity. So then they start to abuse that power. So then what they do is, when people want to join the fraternity, they start hazing them, they start beating on them, they start doing very illegal things, because they've taken this position that they've been given and they've corrupted it. You even think about certain pastors of churches. You are seeing people at their greatest and their lowest points. You're seeing people when they are celebrating amazing things, and people when they have gone through the ringer. And there are pastors who take advantage of the fact that they have access to people in their lowest points and abuse them. We've seen that from everything from molestations to sexual assault to financial theft. And you even look at our government. The purpose of our leaders are to not only protect and lead our country in a way that's morally sound, but also in a way that's supposed to benefit all life. It's supposed to benefit life to all people. But have we seen that? So anything that we have, or have we always seen that? So anything that we have human involvement in, as long as we are the way that we are, unless something miraculous happens in the next 1,000 years, and for me, in my faith belief, it would be like God just descending and whatever. It's like there will always be something, and sometimes that badness is just a little bit, and sometimes it's something like the transatlantic slave trade, or the imprisonment camps of from Hitler, for the Jews and or people of the Judeo sect of life, or it'll look like the terrorist attacks on 9/11, or it may look like somebody taking candy. So with humans, that's the reconciliation I've had with those things. Now, I definitely don't ignore the stories and the significance of always confronting the wickedness that should never be repeated of that, and how we are to honor those who came before us who had to suffer for that, but also sitting with it, and sitting with it where I see it in the Bible, and how I see it still impacting people. And then, like I was sharing with Ant, making sure that that's kind of done away with. Right. You don't want that old theology coming in to creep into people to be oppressive, because it's a theology based on fear. You know what I mean? And so that was my very long way of answering just some of the struggles I've had with it, and kind of like how I've addressed that, if that made any sense.
No, it definitely
did. Definitely did.
There was one question that I really wanted to ask you and see what your thought process on it was, because I know in your podcast you mentioned that there's certain things that you don't consume in your life anymore. And I believe it's because of your walk with Christianity. And I was wondering, what are those things that you just do not consume anymore, besides scary horror films?
Now, and I pop a good junk about that, because The Conjuring 3, I was telling Sid, it just, the older I get, the less tolerance, for some reason, I seem to have for like demonic movies, or what they consider like.
I'm starting to feel too.
I left that theater and I was like, man, I've seen things that are way scarier than this, but this just really disturbed my spirit, and I'm like, am I becoming old, or is this something else? I'm like, I can't sleep. And it's not because anyone in that particular movie was visually scary. It just disturbed me. But I think what disturbed me about it, and I promise you I'll get to the answer to the question. But I think what just disturbed me about it was just the fact that, even though this is a highly Hollywooded, interpretation of things that people do, that there are people who are out there who want to hurt people simply because they can. You know, like, no rhyme or reason, no reason. They just want to, you know. And I always, and to go back to the previous question, you know, like, that's the part that I have a hard time reconciling within myself, of the fact that there are people who exist who choose to hurt people and give people hurt, even if it's not physically, just because. Or like people who want to make your day bad on purpose, you know. So they say something to you to discourage you, or they say something to you to make you feel bad about yourself, or they say something to you to make you feel like you're not doing a good job. And because I'm not that type of person, the fact that we exist in the world simultaneously with those folks, it's always like there's always a clashing of the spirits. You know what I mean? You got people who want to help you, you got people who totally want to hurt you. And for some people, for no reason at all. It's not even like you broke somebody's heart. They just like, I just don't like him, and that's it, you know, which sucks, but I digress. So what don't I consume? So I'll be honest, there's nothing that I totally do not consume. I recognize that there are things that have not been helpful for me in my journey. So if I can get extremely specific, for instance, one of those things would be like pornography, because of the fact that it for me has lessened my desire to be intimate with potentially, hopefully, you know, like my future wife and things like that, because I have ready access to it, you know what I mean? And it has the also same effect that, to me, fast food does. You know what I mean? I have immediate access to it. I can get it whenever I want it. I know it's not amazing for me because it wasn't what it does to my mind, how it over-sexualizes women in some capacities. And I know that's what it's designed to do, because it's, you know, it's for you to get off to, you know what I mean? But how healthy is that as that consumption for me? You know what I mean? What is that giving me? And not that everything has to be transactional, but at what point does it become addictive? You know what I mean? There's been moments in the past when I was in undergrad, and even more recently in the recent years, where I've missed friends' events because I was too busy watching pornography, or I've missed, you know, opportunities because I just had to get off. You know, and I don't mean to be super graphic, but just in that regard, you know, something along those lines. Something else I would say.
I said it doesn't serve you. Yeah.
You know, it doesn't serve you, and I believe that everything we do doesn't have to be like, oh, is this going to give me, you know, the power to go, you know, but I think it's important for us to be cognizant of what anything that we spend a lot of time doing is doing to us. So if I'm eating a lot of McDonald's, and Sid knows, you know, that I have loved me some McDonald's in the more recent years, you know, if I'm eating a lot of it and it's messing up my stomach, and my skin is breaking out, and I'm gaining weight, and that because I'm gaining weight, I can't breathe a certain way. And also generally, as we know, super greasy food just doesn't make us feel good. It does something to like our, outside of like image, it does something to us that I think for most of us, it just does not make us feel good, in a lot of senses. So, monitoring how much I consume, you know, fast food, you know, why am I consuming pornography? You know what I mean? Or in that regard, I don't think that there's anything wrong with the appreciation for human sexuality, for the human sexual experience, but it's just the way that it's manifested. You know what I mean? The energy that it's put into. You know what I mean? There's different ways to, I think, enjoy that component of our being that don't have to do with. I'm going to be careful saying this. When I say the degradation of ourselves, I'm not saying that the people who are the actors in those things are degrading themselves, but there are films that are degrading because of the type of narratives that they push forward, because of the type of things that they share, and the ways that they make you look at people, and the way that they fetishize people because of the color of their skin, or the size of their this, or how big their this is. You know what I mean? I just don't think it serves how we view each other well in that way, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Another thing I'm trying to mindful of is like kind of the music I consume. So I'm not listening to 100 Christian radio all day. I wasn't even raised on that type of music. You know, I was raised on R&B and hip hop. But I also recognize that there are just certain frequencies and energies that are put into music that don't serve me or the general populace well. Anything that's overtly super violent, anything that promotes substance abuse that's harmful to people, anything that promotes negative attitudes towards any specific gender or type of person, because I just don't think that those things are helpful with us loving on each other. I'm a very big advocate for us being good to each other in the best ways that we can. And if I'm listening to music that makes me over sexualize women or makes me hate somebody or makes me want to, we're older, so we're not as impacted as some of our younger counterparts. But for those who are, you know what I mean, for music that may promote them wanting to take an extreme action toward themselves that's non-reversible because of what's being expressed. Just being cognizant of what I'm consuming in that regard too, musically too, because as it's being pumped into your brain and pumped into your body and pumped into your soul, sometimes you live that, and sometimes that energy is carried with you, in my personal belief. Another thing that I try my best not to consume is too much stupidity, to be honest with you. Like I like stupid things, but I also recognize that. Have you ever sat and watched something and you're like, I can't believe I'm still watching this, or why am I watching this?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because it's just rolling. I studied psychology in undergrad, so I'm always thinking about the undertones of the things that I'm viewing and how it's impacting not only my ocular perception, but my soul perception, or my mind perception of what I'm looking at, and how much space, like Sid said, is it taking up, and is it serving me? And also, I try not to look at things that promote people in a negative light too much. So I'm a fan of satire. I love satire, but I refuse to watch too much of anything that will come at any particular community on a consistent basis with the sole purpose of making them look bad. So you think about Donald Trump's speeches in the past. Now, he was the president, so I had to watch his speeches because I needed to know what he was going to say. Most of the time, in my opinion, it wasn't anything of value, but, it's like I have to watch this because I need to know what this leader of the country that I live in is saying. But also, those speeches were filled with a lot of horrible things about people. It dehumanized people and made them things, called them immigrants and wall climbers and, the Chinese virus and the blacks. It's just like, that sounds horrible. And, when we listen to that stuff, it's ingrained in us, because when you make somebody the problem, it's easy to point the finger. So now it's everybody who's coming here from a different country that's the problem, why I can't get a job, and that's why foreigners shouldn't be blah blah blah. And even the language such as foreigners, you know what I mean? I try not to consume that stuff because I know that attitude, especially when you're in a state of distress, like in being in the middle of a pandemic, psychologically, if you are in an extremely stressful environment and somebody's able to give you the point of blame for that stress, naturally your attitude is to attack that point of blame because you think that in attacking them, it'll nullify the issue of the pain that you're experiencing. So, we've all seen those movies where there's a group of friends and they get trapped somewhere, and the food supply is running low and you find out this person's been eating the chips. Have you both seen what's that film? This Is the End?
Yeah.
Okay, so in that film, basically, there's this group of actors, and they're playing themselves. It's the end of the world. They're in LA, and long story short, they're all trapped in this house while the world is ending. And there's this one friend who is very terrible, but they're all terrible. But they all just collectively hate this one dude. So they think that putting him out is going to solve the problems that they have, and it's going to make everything better. But the reality of the issue is, no, the larger problem is that the world is ending, not this friend who sucks. Hell has opened up, things are falling out of the sky, the city is on fire, your friend is terrible, but that's not the main issue we have here. So anything that tries to make somebody look like the problem, I don't care if it's conservative or liberal. If it's trying to make one person good or the bad, because like we shared earlier, there's too much nuance in society and existence, I try not to listen to stuff that makes anyone or any group the bad guy or the bad person. Because it's not fair, and you the three of us know that that's not true, and everybody listening knows that there's no one set group or person or identity that is the bad identity or the cause of all suffering, because we've all played a part in it. So that's pretty much it. I'm trying to kick my sweet tea habit, but it's not going successfully.
No, it ain't. I didn't know you were trying to kick it. I don't know if I believe that. I think you just said that. I think you just lied.
Don't do me like that. Don't do me like that, Sid. Don't do me like that. But yeah, but also more personally, and I would encourage everybody to do this. If you have a problem with your spending, being mindful of what you're spending your money on. If you have a limited income, if you have responsibilities you have to take care of financially. One thing that I've done that has messed me up in the past is I've not adulted in the right way, and I've spent, everybody deserves a treat every once in a while, but there came points where I was treating myself too much, to the point where it came to the detriment of the expenses of my necessities. So being mindful of how I'm spending, being a good steward with what I'm spending my money on, for myself and others. And that's pretty much it. That's what I got for you so far. I'd love to report back to you, in a little while about how all that stuff is going.
I expect it. Expect it on my desk tomorrow.
Dang, tomorrow, that's a real quick turnaround. I'll try my best.
Right? I know, right? So there's one question I wanted to get, another question I wanted to get your opinion on, and see what your thought process is. And me and Sid had this conversation over the years. I feel like we had this conversation a lot, Sid. And it's regarding video games, right?
Mm-hmm.
So right now in the country, there's just a massive amount of shootings going on and innocent lives being taken. And I live in Florida now, and one of the news reports was about a 14-year-old boy. I believe he was actually younger than that. Actually, yeah, he was younger than that. And he was with a girl around the same age as him, and they were shooting at the police. And then the police
sorry, it's
report.
not funny. It's just so Florida.
Yeah.
Florida is. It is.
Yeah, it is. And,
we love the Floridians.
And in the police report, the cop mentioned that the boy was saying something about, yeah, I'm gonna shoot him up like in GTA, right? Do you feel that video games play an influence in these mass shootings, or do you feel like it's a lack of parenting and just letting their kids play these type of games without realizing the repercussions of it?
Absolutely. So I think a big part of that is personal responsibility. I think that unless someone is proven to have any type of mental type of disorder or anything that impairs their ability to fully function cognitively, or when I say fully, in a way that does not impair their moral choices, there's some things in life that you just know are right and wrong, and I know we spoke about nuance, but there are some things that we just know that are just hard rights and hard wrongs. One of those hard wrongs is to take anyone's life simply because you just feel like you want to, or anything's life simply because you feel like you want to. There's a difference between squishing a bug because it is about to crawl into your plate of food and being outside walking on the sidewalk and killing it just because there's a difference in the approach to it. I'm going to be honest. I won't deny the fact that I do potentially think that there is a role that the media that we consume plays in the choices of our youth. So like we were mentioning with music and film and movies and video games. I do also think that there is a level of responsibility and accountability that we do have to hold people to. Because of the fact that at the end of the day, unless this person was 6 years old or 8 years old or 5 years old, they still chose to, because if we think about it, we give younger individuals, and I'm talking about people who are just not of age, the what's the word I'm looking for? The ability to say that they feel this way, they think this way, and we affirm it, and we say to them, we affirm what they're saying, and we take it as true. So we already expressed that we know that they are able to function in a way where they can make their choices, pick their identities, and all these other things. But when it comes to the responsibility of things like such as taking the lives of other people, we want to, or committing crime, we want to, in some sense, undergird that with some kind of cradling and babying, and I just don't believe in that. I think that in the same regard in which you can choose that you want to do whatever, and we affirm that in you, is also the same regard we should hold in more serious matters, like when people choose to shoot up movie theaters or churches or schools or police officers, because you made that willing choice to go and do so. Now, there's of course a layer of umbrella trauma that, impacts people and why they choose to do what they do. But there are also people who just really make bad choices. That video games can affect it. I don't know many dudes throughout anyone. Let me say that I don't really know many people throughout my life. And just so you all know, I was raised in Brooklyn, New York, Crown Heights, in a city where crime is rampant. And in my area, which was not the greatest area, it existed there too. Even the brothers and sisters I knew who were dealing in crime, even with them, I've never heard them mention the things that they were listening to or the things that they played being the direct reason why they chose to do what they do. If for any other reason, it was because of the lack of resources they had, sometimes the lack of education they had, and I don't mean just like formally academically, just in how to navigate working systems and things like that. All of those things impacted the reason why they wanted to commit crime. And then there were also people who were just, they thrived off of chaos. They've thrived off of chaos. They thrive off of violence. They liked being viewed as a power in neighborhoods, and they liked people being afraid of them. So the only way to keep people fearful was that they became agents of chaos, and they just spread it. So I think that everything we consume does impact us. However, I will not give it that much power over someone. It's almost like saying the devil made me do it. You know what I mean? It's like, did the devil make you do it? You know what I mean? Did the devil really make you do it? Or did you kind of sit with this for a moment, pick up that gun, get in your car, drive across town, park your car, get out the car, go into the school or wherever and shoot it up? Because see, you had to take all these steps to get to that point first. So I'm not very quick to say, oh, it's because he was this and he was listening to that. No, I'm sorry. I like I said in the beginning, unless there is some scientific proof or medical proof that this person has something that was impairing their mental judgment, or their ability to function in that regard, I will not rob them of being responsible for their actions, and I won't do things like blame video games or music for it. Now, but I will say, I do blame parents in some regard, because I do believe in the labeling of maturity levels on these things. They need to be taken seriously, because there are people who are still very impressionable. So if it's TVMA or MA or whatever, or T for teen, take that seriously, because usually when they put that on there, that's really what that means. And, I was a kid who, I played things and watched things I had no business watching in my age group. But, as a parent, I've never been a parent. So as a parent, I would think that, you would want to make sure that anything your child is consuming, that you are trusting them to consume, because your parents are usually not watching you play video games. They're usually not watching you, watch movies. They're usually not watching you enjoy the things that they bought you. They need to be present in that, in what they're gifting you to consume. So I do blame parents a little bit. I still do believe in personal choice with a lot of things once we especially reach a certain age. And I do think it is the community responsibility to confront the ways in which those things are glorified in those areas. So if we realize the area we live in is the gang lifestyle is super glorified, we should have just as much oomph as we have in confronting the police as we do in confronting the gang members who run these areas. Because these both can be threats, you know what I mean? But there's one that's a more consistent threat than the other one. Now, this is still very important to tackle, that there should be no abuse of power from law enforcement ever. But if we're being real, there's also an abuse of power in a much, much higher regard when we see reports and things that come from within our own communities, regardless of what type of community you come from, that has crime involved in it. So being responsible as a community to confront all evils as they manifest themselves within the lives of our children. So that's where I stand on that.
I agree with you on everything you said, and sometimes I feel like even the media and just parents of these children, they like to use music and video games as a scapegoat and not look at how they're parenting their children, and the fact that you spend $60 on a violent video game which has a rating on it. So it's not like you don't know what the game involves, right?
Right.
And you still give it to your child, who, in my opinion, shouldn't play that. Like, I didn't play the first rated M mature game I received. Was, I believe I was in 9th grade, maybe 10th, and that was Halo 2. And even then, like, my mom was very strict on when we played video games. Like, me and my brother could only play video games on the weekend, and that started Friday through Sunday. But like Monday through Thursday, like, we weren't allowed to play any video game at all, because my mom wanted us to stay more focused on school. And honestly, I'm glad she did that. But at the same time, I don't think she would let video games be used as a scapegoat if I was to do something wrong. She would just know, no, it had nothing to do with video games. It's just she knows I messed up at that point.
Yeah. No, I agree with that 100%. I mean, yeah, you're right, Anthony. Not you and I mean, shit, I did a whole report about it in undergrad when we were at Penn State together. You know, like I've gotten into arguments with people about it, especially around here in PA, because people are ignorant. But you know, and I'm like, okay, but can we talk about the fact that a child got a gun? Like,
Right.
that's probably the bigger problem, right? That like, she, like, you know, yeah, I don't know. I just think I agree with both of you. It comes down to a lot of factors. It's not one single thing. And games and movies are often used as scapegoats when it's like, yeah, but you can watch the news and see crazy shit too. I mean, you know,
social media is another thing.
Right. I mean, you know, going back to games, like you were saying, especially nowadays, though, a lot of people are buying games digitally. So your kid can't even buy it unless they stole your credit card, which is a whole other problem, or you bought it for them, you know? So it's like, and for parents, like, there's a trailer. Like, every one of these games now, like, when you go online or you go to buy it digitally, there's screenshots, there's trailer. Like, you can see, oh, I don't want my kid playing this, or, oh, but you're right. Like, parents, I think a lot of days or a lot of times are just like, oh, you want this? I'll give you this to shut you up so you can go in this room and leave me alone. You know, there isn't like that desire or maybe desire is the wrong word, but like effort to like connect with your kid outside of just giving them something to do and send them off to, you know, bye-bye. But again, it's like, but you the one who has guns in the house. Like, if violent video games and the media was truly the problem, other countries would be having these issues. They're not. Why? Because somebody can't just go to Walmart and buy a gun. But that's neither here nor there.
No, absolutely. I 100% agree. 110%. You know, it's like, where do we? And one cultural shift that I like and don't like at the same time that I think we're having is we are looking at the factors that impact the ways in which people think, which is amazing and super, super helpful. But in that same regard, we're also denying people of the responsibility of the choices they make. So, you know, we protect people in saying, you know, using things like trauma and experience, and which is great. You know what I mean? It's important, and I think it's essential. And I think that in the right capacity, it's very well served. But if we are excusing people, you know, like we see it with, like, you know, like Dylan Roof, you know what I mean? When he went and shot up the church in South Carolina, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, he was this and he was that. And well, sure. But at the end of the day, he still committed a crime, and he was of a certain age, and he chose to go and kill people. Not only that, he sat through the entire church service and then killed everybody at the end. It's not like he came in and just started blazing. He went in, spoke with these people, sat with them. One of the guys actually was a student at my place of work. One of the pastors was a student at my place of work. He came in, sat down, fellowship with these people, had Bible study, they prayed together, and at the end, he unloaded on all of them. You know what I mean? So at that point, there's just a level of just, I guess not forgiveness, but there's only but so much that I guess in my capacity I can excuse someone of their own choices, because I believe in personal responsibility while also simultaneously believing in influences. But I also do believe at a certain age, you know, it's like, listen, you know, I'm sorry that these things, of course I'm speaking of stuff in a lesser capacity, but I'm sorry that these things, you know, have happened to you, but
that doesn't excuse that behavior.
You know, you know, and so yeah, it's a weird space to be in, because I can see how a game like Halo could excite you to go to war or want to be in the military, but if you're gonna play Halo, I think that it's and I'm just saying this just as a general since you mentioned it. But also there should be a similar conversation. I'm sorry, if you're gonna play Halo, there should also be a conversation about everything else that is involved in the military. So not just the fact that you get to, I mean, someone who would want to just get to do this anyway probably should be observed anyway.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like not in the military, anyway. But the realities of what that commitment means, what it means to serve your country, what it means to, for lack of a better term, give your life for the lives of others. And the significance and the super importance behind before making that decision, you making that decision. And that goes for anything you commit yourself to work-wise. Video production, ministry, anything that we do. Why are you doing it? What's the why behind it? And that's it. Because that'll turn into a whole nother rant.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, I think, like what everybody said, like that's totally valid. It's a weird conversation, and I think that it also ignores but the games aren't just about that. Like, they have stories, dog. Like there's much more happening here, like in Halo and some of these other things, that's actually telling you war is bad, right? Yeah. So it's like, if you actually read or watched the thing you were talking about, you would know that you're tripping. But Elijah, man, we've had you here for almost 2 hours. So,
man, it's not felt like it. I've enjoyed it.
I think we've had an amazing conversation. And we would love to have you back, maybe on the main show, talking about, I don't know, something. We'll work something out after this. I'm sure, because I think this was a good episode. I mean, they're all good. All of our interviews have been good, but like this one, I don't know, something about it was special. So. I really appreciate you taking the time, Mr. Host of the Soul Paramedic podcast. Please plug everything. Where can people find you? Where can we hit up the podcast? Yes. Give me all the deets.
Absolutely. Thank you, bro. And Sid and my brothers, thank you for having me. Everyone, who's listening. I'm not sure how Discord works, so I just keep saying everyone who's listening. These two dudes, just to plug them really quickly, are just some of the most amazing brothers I met in the past couple of years. Getting to know, everything from how they treat people to the ways, the commitment that they have to bringing you all this material and their work outside and their family life outside. You all follow some really good dudes. So even though, their platform, they're talking about everything under the sun that has to do with video gaming and gaming and computers and anime and superheroes and all the things that all three of us love. Please also recognize that they are also outside of this guys with great hearts, who are just great resources. And I'll stop right there because I don't want to get them into anything that they did not ask for. But just know that you guys are following and supporting some really, really dope brothers. And I don't just say that just because I'm here tonight. I know it for a fact. But as far as a plug, you can find me on Instagram at the Soul Paramedic Podcast. That's the name of the Instagram page, the Soul Paramedic Podcast. The Soul Paramedic is the name of the podcast, and I'm currently on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. I have a Facebook page. I'm not active on it. It's the same thing, the Soul Paramedic. You can go there and like it if you want to. It's not necessary, but I am more active on, definitely way more active on Instagram. And even, if you want to comment on the things in any one of the mediums that I mentioned that you can listen to for the podcast, feel free to do so. And I would love to have you. I would love to walk with you on this journey as we all just, navigate life and traverse some new territories and even sometimes circle back to familiar ones, because life is a continual journey. And sometimes you go straight at the mountain and sometimes you're coming around the valley, and no, you're coming around the mountain. You're coming around the mountain. There we go. You're coming around the mountain and then sometimes you get over the hill. So, yeah. It's been amazing. I'm so glad I got to be here tonight. Thank you both for having me. Whoever is here, thank you for joining. Continue to support, continue to be here, continue to listen, because all of the episodes are great. And that is it. That's all I got.
Well, brother, we appreciate you, man. And we will see you next time, agents. Peace.
Peace.